one. So, Dr. Eva, welcome to the show. How's things with yourself?
It's awesome. Thank you so much, Simon. I'm really excited to be here. I was jamming out to some music earlier and thinking about what we're going to talk about, but I like the idea of just not going, unscripted, no bullet points, just complete authenticity coming through here. So
I think that's always the best way with these podcast shows. I just love it when it's like a natural coffee shop conversation. And I think you always get the best things from those. So anyway, Eva, I want to know a bit about you, because obviously given your profession, it's one that we don't really see a lot of, especially in England where I'm from. But I'd love to know, how did you get into this? What's the story behind how this life?
Do you want the short version of that, or do you want the long version of that, Simon?
I want the one which you feel is the best one, and for our listeners, that's the one I want.
All right, cool. So it's kind of interesting, my journey, and I'll do it in the short version, but have some ad libs. I started when I was 20 in a direct sales, and I was in Passion Parties, direct sales marketing company out of Las Vegas. And I loved working with women and helping them understand their bodies more. Yeah. And I always thought that I wanted to be a sex therapist. Like I was like in undergraduate, I was like, that's what I want to do. And so I said, okay, let me join Passion Parties and see if it's something that I really like. Do I like educating women? Do I like talking about sex? Do I like talking about things that are vulnerable and intimate with people? And I loved it. That's a short answer, right? And I was in the business for like 10 years, and I ended up becoming like an executive director with the company. Amazing. And I loved every moment of it. But what was the saddest moment for me during that time is when I would sit down with the ladies, and I would be in the ordering with them, because I did one-on-one ordering. We sold, penises, God knows what, lubricants, everything,
I love already where this conversation is going to go.
Yeah, we're going to have fun, Simon. No worries. So I was like, all right. And I would do one-on-one conversations with these ladies, and they would end up, most of them, I would say 50%, if not 60% of them, started crying, and just kind of really giving it to me and telling like, cause I was teaching them sexual education. Their hope was that I could help their marriage. And I felt super deficient in my knowledge. I didn't know how to support them. The only thing I knew how to do was hold space, listen to them cry, and say, hey, maybe we can spruce things up in your sex life, right? Yeah. And so as I was going through this 10 years of this direct sales career, getting more and more in line with women and so forth and so on, I was like, that's it. I'm going to school. And that was like the natural progression for me, because I wanted to get my education. And I never thought I was going to get my master's. I never thought I was going to get my PhD. Hell no. I was like, I don't want to do a dissertation. I don't want to do research. Nothing like that. Nothing like of that excites me. However, when I was in, especially like my programs, talking about theory, totally turned me on. Theory, how to create change for people, how to, get people where they are to where they really want to be, understanding the mind and negation and all these cool concepts. And so I ended up, building out a private practice 11 years ago, and, the rest is history, that's it. I actually, my private practice is crazy. The story behind my private practice is really crazy, because it went to 6 figures in 6 months, Simon, here.
Wow.
In 6 months. I mean, boom. Like overnight,
organically, word of mouth,
organically, because of word of mouth. I had no website, I had no marketing. I literally went in there. I literally went in there thinking, honey, how am I going to pay for the rent? He's like, you'll get clients, don't worry. I'm like, okay. And I just took that leap of faith, and that's what happened. I mean, it's just crazy. It blows my mind still.
I love that. I know this episode isn't about business, but this really does kind of like throw into the whole lesson of why I think you should really follow the things that excite you and light you up the most, because they're always the things that it magnets people towards you straight away. And I think especially given the line of work that you do, I personally feel, and from the conversations I've had over my 12 years of doing this, is that this is a very, very specific niche with such a big calling for it. I feel like we don't really get educated through school on these things properly. I don't feel like we just kind of have to, like a child trying to walk, like stumble our way through, work it out. And I also think from a male perspective, I think that's why it'll be good to obviously have my perspective on this, is you don't really have people to speak to as a dude about this stuff.
Yeah.
So
I know.
Yeah.
And even when women have the opportunity to really speak to women, it's not always the best advice. Usually it's a projection of what's happening inside of their insecurities, you should be doing this, you should be doing that. That was my whole high school and undergraduate, by the way. And so it doesn't really help. What really helps is education, people really getting out there and understanding like how to communicate. There's actually a mastery to that. How to create emotional intimacy, through presence, and then also through communication. And then how then, this is the real thing, right? Do we then get into the sexual relationship, and how do we then surrender the control and all these other things that we have, over time guarded ourselves with? As human beings, we just are naturally want to defend ourselves. We naturally, go into that survival instinct, and some of us don't even know that. Some of us don't even realize that some aspects of our personalities are actually just our defense mechanisms.
I absolutely love the fact you just said that.
Cool.
I think it's so true, because I think, especially in this world of love and intimacy, I think the things that we are scared of the most, or what we protect ourselves from, are also stopping us from the things that we want the most. So for the majority of time, like I know through friends and stuff like this, when people have come to me and they're like, oh, I don't want to go into this 2 feet or commit because I'm scared of getting hurt. And I'm like, but if this is your fear and this is what the barrier and the armor that you're wearing, it's going to stop you from actually getting love. So I love how you've just said that.
We're going to have a conversation tonight, Simon. And in speaking that, I just wanted to throw in there real quick before we go on to another topic real quick, that we actually attract the same level of differentiation or the same level of tolerance for difference. We attract that same partner. You know what I mean? It's almost like you get the clients that you need to grow. It's that same thing, and you might not really even want to attract the thing that you're attracting. You know what I mean? But on some level, subconsciously, you're attracting that in, Anyway, that's where I wanted to throw in.
No, let's stay on that. I like this topic. I like the whole topic, to be honest, what we're going to into. This is going to be a lengthy show. But going back onto that topic, do you feel that this is a reason why, like, I'm a huge advocate for self-awareness. Like, do you believe this is why it's such an important factor for both parties who are in a relationship to focus on themselves and kind of get the self-awareness of those things so that it can create growth together? Is that a big thing for you?
Yeah, I think this is like the chicken before the egg, or the you know what I mean, conversation. So you can do it 2 ways and probably 100 other different ways. But the ways that I know in my mind right now that are coming to the top of the head is you can do it individually, and you can do that deep growth work. Or you can use your relationship as a mirror for that growth work instead of projecting all of your shit. Excuse me, I hope you can curse on here.
Oh, yeah, go nuts.
Instead of projecting all of your stuff onto your partner, you can actually learn to hold space in a relationship and hear about their wounds and their traumas. Actually, almost like, I posted about this a couple days ago. 70% of communication difficulties is actually trauma informed. It's trauma. It's just they're projecting. It's like this, Simon. Remember, like, you're in a relationship. I've been in a relationship right before. Obviously, I'm married, but this one's actually a successful relationship. I mean, the other relationships I had, right? You start off with like conversation A, right? And then conversation B happens. Conversation A, couples go into it with all this intent. I want to have a conversation. I want to speak my heart. I want to share what my need, want, or desire is. And then conversation B happens, which is usually the trigger. And that trigger is from a trauma, no matter what, and that's kind of like where I come into play for couples, kind of going into that trauma relationship and understanding. And I don't pity people, I don't feel sorry for people. When my couples come in and they work with me, they're like, okay, this happened to you. All right, cool. We're going to give ourselves a big hug. And then now we're going to figure out how we're going to interact in this way with my couples. And they love it because I can hold space for them, and it doesn't feel like they're vulnerable in any way. Most vulnerable they've ever shared with someone. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. I was going to say, like, given this sort of stuff then, because obviously the big thing here is intimacy, isn't it? That's the biggest thing that most to be seen, right, so to speak. And I'm presuming, obviously, if these things are in the way, or they're getting in the way, then people aren't actually going to get what it is that they really want at the end of the day, is it?
Right. Yeah, it's actually really common. Research shows that couples go into the relationship, they criticize, they're defensive, and they stonewall. Okay, those are the three things. However, happily married couples, the thing that they do is the emotion of contempt. Contempt or resentment is the key feeling or emotion that ends marriages and ends relationships. You just get to a point where you're just like, no, I can't do it anymore, you know?
Yeah.
And, of course, they're kind of like banging their head against the wall the whole time, trying to find the solutions because couples just want solutions to what's going on, but sometimes they don't find the right person. Even other couples therapists or other people that my couples have been to didn't serve them in the way that they're able to be served through the relationship that I'm able to hold. And that's not like an ego fest or anything like that. It's just the facts. There's some people out there that can really just hold that space for couples, because holding space for couples is a lot of energy.
Yeah.
I mean, you have two different relationships, two different egos, two different personalities in front of you at all times. And, you really need to navigate that very carefully, because otherwise you got a trigger popping off before you know it. So yeah, the long and short of it is get to the trauma root. And when my couples understand, oh, okay, this is coming from a place of hurt, guess what happens? They can now team up with each other instead of against each other in a war. And they can start to heal together. And then they end up start really getting into their own personal work. So I guess the answer to that question is, in a long and short way, right, is you can do it by yourself before you get into a relationship. But honestly, you're not going to know what's triggered until you get into a relationship.
This is really hilarious that you're speaking about this. So I'll give you a bit of my backstory. So I've actually been single now for like 5-6 years. I think we're on the cusp of. Yeah, totally. But I came to a realization. Like, I came out of a relationship badly. Like, it was an awful end. And I just thought, you know what? I am gonna literally I'm the problem here. I need to go and work on myself and kind of undo this. And this is what kind of led on the whole self-development growth curve. And I'm thankful for that. And
cool.
It's amazing that you said this, because recently I totally get that. It's only when you start opening yourself up and kind of going into these things, or dating, or putting yourself back, for example, on the market, and opening yourself up to those things again, that you're actually like, oh, that's still there. That sounds like, yeah. So I totally get what you mean there, and I can really reflect that back. It's only when you actually start going back into it that you do get the immediate feedback.
The triggers.
Yeah, straight up.
And also, someone else's triggers, this happens all the time. Like, doesn't matter how many couples are in front of me, Simon. When one person comes into the relationship, I'll use my example with my husband. So let's get into that, right? Because you want to know, this is a podcast also about, the person too.
Oh, totally.
So Paul's family system comes from, don't talk about it, don't rub it, very masculine energy home. Okay, my husband, 6'3", you can imagine, muscle guy, right? This is how I met him. And
the alpha.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. We both had a healthy amount of ego, for sure, in our relationship when we first met. And by the way, you can't get around it. The ego is actually like a protection mechanism, but if you become mindful of it, you can really start to get, be clear and be vulnerable about what's coming up, But anyway, so my husband came from that family system, so they didn't talk about things and they avoided conflict and stuff like that. In my family system, Italian, Jewish, Irish, loud people, like crazy loud people that I love with all my heart, but they don't listen, they don't really acknowledge people when they talk, so I came from this home, and I don't carry these wounds with me. I'm just talking facts, right? When I came from that place, I had this fear of not feeling good enough when I left my home for my dad. I had this fear of like not feeling supported by my mom. These are my old childhood wounds, And so I got into the relationship with hubby, and by the way, like, it was complete bliss during our engagement. We were engaged for like 3 years. We got married. And then we started kind of getting into a little bit of a power struggle. And I started to notice like, okay, like it's getting real here, So what happened was Paul kind of went through a depression when we first got married because he sold his business. It was a restaurant owner in Fort Lauderdale, and it was kind of like a disappointment, that the restaurant ended up closing. So he kind of went into that space, and then I went into full, last year of my PhD doing research, 50 hours a week. You could imagine what that was like. Not a lot of sex, let's put it that way. And then on top of it, like masculine, this is like 8 years ago or so, maybe 9, getting all the practice, really, really starting to like rise, right? So at the time, we were just in this weird place we found ourselves in. So we would have arguments, and his triggers of feeling criticized in his family, his triggers of being judged in his family, his triggers of not being heard, because we actually had the same trigger, by the way. My triggers of not being heard, right? Not being acknowledged. When we get into an argument, it would be like me talking and then him looking at the wall, right? This was the experience for a while. And it's not because we weren't connected, because when we weren't fighting, everything was jolly. Like we were having fun. We've been best friends since we met. We have such a beautiful relationship, and we have grown so much, and I'm so proud of us. I mean, sometimes we walk around the neighborhood and I'm like, damn, can you believe how much we've grown in the time that we've met each other? And every single year, like it's a goal of ours now, where we look back at our last year, we're like, all right, what could we like do this year together, And we're always throwing ourselves into retreats and stuff now. But at the beginning, we really had to figure ourselves out, and we had to do it the hard way. We didn't go to a coach. We didn't go to a couples therapist. Like we didn't get any resources at all to get through this whatsoever. Really another dumb idea. But as I was going through and as I was listening to, working with my clients and developing the practice, and then I started really getting into research, I was like, oh, honey, I know how to fix this. And thank God my husband doesn't have that big of, an ego. His ego can fit through the door. Let's put it that way. So can mine. And we learn from each other. And every single day I'm learning something from my husband because I've surrendered that control. I've surrendered that fear that I wasn't fully supported, as a woman. And all that stuff comes from family stuff, and then once you really start to recognize it, the cool thing is, Simon, is that you then have a choice. You can have a choice to become a victim to that, or you can have a choice to become accountable to that and then speak that truth when it comes up.
I totally get that. Would you say one of the biggest things is like moving it from an unconscious relationship to kind of like conscious? Like
totally.
Really, yeah.
Conscious
that's the big game changer.
communication.
I think that's pretty much one of the biggest keys, really, isn't it?
Yeah, but a lot of people don't know how to get there. They don't know the roadmap because, I mean, if you take a look at our system, right? The government, the prison systems, the school systems, almost every type of business is really focused on knowledge, and they're really focused on what do you know versus what do I know? I mean, the whole world is in a real ego struggle, power struggle. Yeah. And we're really not taught to get to the emotion of something. And a lot of my men at my practice, they come in, they say, hey, Eva, I'm not really emotional. I'm like, that's good. You don't have to cry in my office. All you have to do is tell me what you're feeling. And they kind of look at me like, what do you mean? And I'm like, a feeling is actually just one word. It's one word. I feel frustrated. I feel lonely. I feel unhappy. I feel sad right now. I feel triggered. It's just one word. And then when the men, it's even women too, it's both parties, because of course, women don't like to be seen, they want to be in that control seat too, just as much as the opposite sex. There really is no difference. Okay. But the point that I'm making here is that it's just one word. It's just understanding and accessing that it's not like I have to be emotional wreck or I have to be crying my eyes out, you know what I mean, in order to have emotion. I can still contact what that is. And very few of my clients have a hard time accessing that one emotion. You know what I mean? Like they might have a hard time being emotional, but eventually they start to kind of weed the guard out that they have.
From a guy's point of view, I think the way it's set up as well is we're kind of like taught not to show emotions or not to wear your heart on your sleeve, you know, and don't
Oh,
really
totally.
express yourself. And I think
Yeah.
that's where it screws us up even further.
Yes.
How would you, I'd love to speak about this because I think this has been one of the biggest turning points for myself is when I actually just did it. And it was one of the biggest things in business as well. But for say, for example, like guys or girls, if someone is listening and they do have a hard time kind of like expressing or tapping into their emotions or just speaking like, I actually feel like this. Is there any like work or any exercises that people could do that would help that? Because it's a big thing.
Yes. It's called multi-generational family emotional awareness. Okay. So what I do is I go in, that's the long word for it. Okay. That's the clinical word. Really nice and boring. Okay. But what I do when I have couples come in, seriously, Simon, in the very first session, and if I don't do this, the couple will be lost completely. So what happens with people that are having trouble accessing their emotions? The truth is that they're suppressed. They've suppressed that emotion. And until they go back to that moment in time or that emotional experience and unsuppress it by just becoming aware that, oh, I did feel once. And then I shut it down because it hurt too much. And honestly, that's a good thing. It's a good thing. By the way, there's this whole thing that people are talking about these days, you know, that suppression is actually a bad thing. And in the long game, it's a very bad thing. But in the short game, when you're in a bad situation, I mean, I have clients that literally have got the shit kicked out of them as kids. I mean, emotionally and physically, like I am so connected to humanity, Simon, because of the work that I do, because I like to the worst of humanity and like the best of humanity. You know what I mean? And it's like, it's sad, but that's how they need people need to suppress in order to survive sometimes.
Yep.
That's it. Now, once they realize that, first of all, they're normal and it's totally okay that you did that and that there's no shame and there's no disappointment around that whatsoever. And that is a huge, actually, piece of the puzzle. Because when people internalize shame and disappointment because they suppress, you know, because partners that are suppressed, they usually end up finding a partner that's not as suppressed, maybe a little bit more suppressed, but they usually end up, hey, you know, when are you going to share your emotions? Hey, when are you going to do this? And they have all these expectations, you know, that build up for this person, male or female, doesn't matter. And you know, they feel like there's something's missing in them, you know? So when they come into my office and I sit with them or I talk to them through video or whatever, and I say, hey, it's okay that you're going, especially if this is their first experience of psychology, if this is their first experience of understanding the mind, you know, you have to understand that these people are normal, everyday average people. They're not, you know, leaders, you know, teaching and coaching other people. These are people that are lawyers, you know, even doctors, surgeons, CEOs that are not thinking about the mind all the time. You know, they have to keep a body survive on the table, you know, or they have to make sure that the kids get lunch. I mean, I don't know, whatever it is that people are doing, right? Not everybody thinks about the mind. So once you start to get into that realm and they start to feel normal, then they start to go into, okay, this did happen and this is my emotional experience. So what I do without re-traumatizing them, because I'm very like particular about that, but I'm also not that particular at the same time, because I'm okay with people crying. You know, I'm okay with people because that sometimes turns people back on, you know, their emotions. It's like a switch, you know what I mean? Where they turn back on. People are so used to like re-traumatizing. You don't need to get into details, but you just need to tell me, what was the emotion that you had in relationship to your mother? What was the saddest emotion? What was the happiest? What was the happiest and sad with your father? What was the happiest and saddest with your brother and sister? I mean, literally those questions. And all they need to do is just give me one feeling and we can go from there. You know, it's not like you need content and details upon details to be able to understand the source of that pain. And then once I learn that, then I'm like, oh, okay, now I can see how her family system and your family system are interacting. And then that's when the beauty begins, because now they can figure out how to support each other. Does Does that make sense? And
Yep.
they can figure out how to support themselves as well. Because it's not our partner's job to heal us. We have to heal for ourselves, but it's our job to also hold space for our partners to be there. I mean, what's the whole point of loving someone if you're not going to allow vulnerability? I think we're here to heal each other. I think humans are here to either war each other or heal each other. And I'm hoping for more healing and more love and more vulnerability.
Well, that clearly falls in line with everything, doesn't it? Like the art of fulfillment is service to others. So
right.
Yeah, that falls in line.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be a full-fledged coaching business. It could be just serving your kids. It could be serving your husband or serving your wife. Absolutely. Of course, others. And people talk about all the time too that, my partner's selfish. It's not that they're selfish. It's that they needed to be selfish. Every single thing makes sense within the context. They needed to be selfish within their environment at some point. And then you get into disorders and all types of stuff after that, which is a whole nother conversation. But
we can delve down these. But what I want to do is let's strip this back and build it back. So you mentioned very early about the roles of masculine and feminine. And I think these are two things that don't really get spoken about a lot. Maybe we don't know, or we don't know how to identify where we are on that scale or where our default is and kind of the things that we need to work on. So I'd love to know from your aspect, like A, how do you define these? What is the masculine role, the feminine role? And B, how do we kind of like work out ourselves where we are on that and what we need to build on?
Yeah, so I like to think of like masculine and feminine, from my perspective anyway, as energy that you possess and energy that I possess. I mean, my husband is a perfect example of like divine masculine, like he is protective when he needs to be. And then he is also extremely loving and gentle, like more gentle than any soul that I've had the opportunity to really engage at this level. And I think that's also a testament to my own personal work, giving up control, giving up, all my scarcity thoughts and stuff like that at the very beginning too, and allowing myself to go deeper. But feminine and masculine energy, I think, is in all of us. And I think for me personally, and I have so much more work to do in this life, and more things to understand. But for me, it's like finding a balance. When I was going through my schooling and I was building my business, I was in masculine energy pretty much all the time, Simon. And I did it because of a scarcity mindset. I did it for, so many reasons, And when I started to understand quantum physics and energy and cybernetics and like all these things, I started to understand that I needed to really tap into my feminine energy more, sitting, stretching, dancing, and of course, sexual energy. It's funny. I was having this thought earlier, and I was like, you know what, this might come up tonight. So I was just thinking about it for a second. But sex itself is the best way to practice this type of energy, okay? To build the polarity in your relationship, in your marriage, in your relationship. Building
That's
polarity.
The best homework ever.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's such a good way to do it, and you don't have to practice BDSM or crazy shit if you're not into it, but if you want to, go for it. But, you can just practice it in the subtle energies, like the subtle psychic energies, and also learn to like vocally express too, like during sex. Sex is actually connected to absolutely everything in life, your business, your relationship, your yoga, your everything, like how you do sex is how you do everything, and and for me as a woman, it's like you really have to, it becomes, people are so used to, let's start here, the physical body and getting into this, like, okay, you take penthouse, you take like the whole male gaze conversation, and like, let's just kind of turn that on its head, because I think that comes from a place of not being fully sacred, you know? And objectification is fun. I mean, it's fine if you're doing it in the idea of sacred connection. You know what I mean? And of course, we're human beings and all this, you know, physical, raw, natural, animalistic stuff too, right? I mean, there's so many dynamics here, but let's just take two people in a relationship. Could be same sex, could be heterosexual, doesn't matter. And you're in the midst of having sex, learning to think and be mindful of not just your physical bodies and your physical proximities, or what your partner's hair smells like, or what their bodies feel like on your skin. It's understanding that there's like this whole spiritual sacred element to personal growth work when you're making love. Like, it's the quickest way to manifest shit. You know, like, for example, with me, like, we practice this all the time. You know, you're safe to stand in your power. You know, you're safe to stand in your power, because I have a powerful presence, you know, so it's just learning to like really ground into that energy. And so sometimes when I'm working on that personal growth work in the middle of, you know, sex with my husband, he'll say, you know, you're safe to stand in your power, because when you're having an orgasm, it's actually a state of hypnosis. And the message of your personal work goes right into your brain at that moment, if that makes sense, Simon. So you can use sex for so many different realms. Like, you can use it not just for being in service and pleasing this partner. You can do both and, you know, you can work on vocally expressing more. You can work on allowing yourself to surrender, like intentionally telling your physical body to relax, you know, to allow this person who you love, right, or who you're allowing to invite into that space, doesn't matter if you're in love or not, to be part of that soul, you know, to be part of that merging, which is why it's important to be really careful who you sleep with, you know, because there's an imprint. There's even research that shows that there's a psychic and a physical imprint, that you can still find DNA of men that you've slept with 10, 15 years ago in your body, which is insane to me, you know? So you really have to be careful.
I actually read something on this the other week. Oh, when was it? After, I can't remember what it was, but it was on about how, like, the exact same conversation. It was like how you can still carry the partner's energy, like 2 to 3 weeks plus more afterwards. Yes. So it's like, really be careful on what you're bringing in, what you're allowing in, because it can stick. Like, oh.
Yeah, especially if you're doing it for approval, like you're at the beginning stages of yourself, like approval sex, or, you know, those types of things, you know, where you're just doing it to connect with a body and a person because you're feeling so lonely. I mean, I've certainly had sex like that, okay? But we're not talking about that right now. You know, we're talking about adding layers of your personal growth work into your sexual relationship with your partner. And my couples love it. They're like, Eva, are you serious? You really want me to do that? I'm like, yeah, like, try it out. And they go home and they're like, oh, that was the coolest thing ever. Our kids totally woke up, but it was fine, you know? And you know, they're always so worried about the kids and stuff. I'm like, kids are just as loud as we are, you know? Just tell them I was listening to the TV loud or something, or explain to them what sex is. You know, you'd be surprised. Kids are actually much more equipped to understand sex than adults.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, really yeah. Yeah, Dad was hammering in a picture frame last night. But,
exactly.
Yeah. You went into something then. I really think this is quite a big topic. And again, I've not really heard a lot of conversations around this, and from the material that I've read, is when sex actually comes to a place from pleasing other people. And I know, again, I've got quite a large group of girl mates who I knock around with, who have these very open conversations. And a lot of them have spoke about this, which was like actually going into things for pleasing others and actually coming to that realization that it's time to get away from that. So I'd love to know from your knowledge base, is when sex is attached to pleasing others, is this when a place where it can become quite damaging, or what are your thoughts around it?
It depends on what level that, like, if you're talking about sex addiction, it could become extremely damaging. I mean, I have a lot of clients that have, I use that word addiction very loosely, but, you know, are very, you know, binding their anxiety with sex. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And I talk about anxiety as like just life force energy, not like clinical anxiety, you know what I mean? Where people are taking pills and stuff, but just everyone
Yeah.
has like a baseline life force anxiousness about them. You know, it's just being alive. You have a nervous system, right? But I don't think on like a normal level that it's damaging, but it's certainly not fulfilling.
That's a better way of putting it.
Yeah. And it's also not fully expressed. When you're in the place of trying to please others, your mind is, does my body look okay? Are my boobs too big? Do I have this? It's all about serving that person. You know, does this look okay? Does this not look okay? A fully liberated woman and man, by the way, my husband plays drums in the bedroom now. Okay. You know, when
I love this guy.
a fully expressed woman, right? A fully expressed woman is not necessarily abandoning their partner's pleasure, but it becomes a union of pleasure. Because I find that men can be in their pleasure and not really feel like they need to serve anything or anyone quite easily. Like, I don't think men carry the same amount of wounds that women do with regard to serving and pleasing their men, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Not saying that men don't live to, you know, make their partner have a pleasure. I mean, my husband loves that, you know. It's just that it's like a union and a meeting of the sexual energies as opposed to a projecting the energy, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so a fully expressed woman is not thinking about her boobs. She's not thinking about the cellulite on her butt or this or that. She's thinking about her own pleasure. Like, she's thinking about what turns her on. She's like in her body instead of in her mind. And when a woman can finally access that, it's like the most liberating and most free. And the best way to start doing it, if it's too uncomfortable, if our listeners are listening and it's too uncomfortable for them to do with their partners, and which by the way, I'll talk about that in a second. Remind me of that. If they can't do it with their partners, remind me. Okay. Do ecstatic dance. I do ecstatic dance probably 3 or 4 times a week, where I literally, like, I'm in the house by myself. I put on some yoga music or something. I do some stretching, and I will totally dance, sometimes with my eyes closed, even though there's furniture. And I will dance just to be in my body. Like, I don't look in the mirror. I don't look at what I look like. I don't care. You know, sometimes I'll catch myself. I'll be like, oh, wow, okay, that was interesting. But, you know, it's like you're just in your body, you know, and you can practice that. That's the thing you can practice. And it's a mindset and it's a practice.
I love this. Pretty much when we put up the conversation, the question piece over on our Instagram channels, one of the main things we got this, I think it came through about 8 times, was how there's anxiety before sex. And I love the way that you've done this. Is it's the element of people pleasing, being in your own head and not actually being in the moment or in body.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember talking before we end this topic, I was thinking too that a lot of my couples have a hard time with this anxiety before sex. And I certainly had that experience during the course of my 11-year marriage. And about 3 years ago is when I made this shift where I was like, I'm going to become fully embodied. Like, it was actually a decision that I made, Simon. It wasn't something that happened automatic for me. And so I remember at the very beginning, my husband and I were sitting in the jacuzzi, and I said, babe, how often do you think we're having sex? And by the way, the average couple has sex about two times a month, right? And so my husband said, I don't know, like 50 times a year or 100 times a year. And I looked at him and I said, I don't know what marriage you're in. And I was laughing. And he's like, what do you mean? And he started thinking like, man, I guess I was having a lot more sex in my head with you, honey. I don't know, you know? So we both kind of decided, okay, let's make a plan. And so we made love for 3 months in a row every day. And like, there were days that I was like in my closet, like feeling this anxiety, and I had to break through it. And this whole experiment that I did with my husband was like, first of all, he was like, I'm game, ready, sign me up, honey, you know. And for me, it was like a huge like experiment for me. Like I was like, no, I don't even know if I can do this, you know? I mean, to open myself up, you know, I think of a woman like a flower, you know, where they kind of come out, you know, during the day and then they close back up at night. You know, women have cycles and rhythms, you know. It's not like masculine energy, right? So I was thinking, I mean, we have our menstrual cycles, all these things, right? Where we're kind of tapped into that from a primal place. So anyway, right? I remember sitting in my closet, Simon. I remember thinking to myself, all right, just breathe through it. I committed to this. What is the purpose of doing this, Eva? And I said that to myself. I said, okay, it's to be fully expressed. It's to feel embodied in myself and to give myself a little bit of a challenge, right? And as I went through those 3 months, at about a month in, or like a month and a half or so, I started not having the anxiety anymore. And I started realizing that the anxiety, and I always do these types of experiments with myself first before I tell my couples to do it, by the way. So I remember realizing that my anxiety was about letting the control, about fully surrendering. And also it was about my lifestyle that I was living. My lifestyle back then was alpha female, got everything under control. You know what I mean? Like, let's just work my ass off 24/7, go to the gym for an hour and I'm good, you know? Like, that's not enough for me. I realized, you know, as a woman, that's not enough for me. I needed to, you know, sit in the lawn. I needed to go take a walk, a long walk with my dog, or I needed to meditate. While I was doing this parallel stuff, Simon, relationships started to come together. The change in lifestyle with the mindset work, all of a sudden, here we are. We're now living in a fully expressed relationship. And since that moment, we really never look back, and I never experienced anxiety really anymore. I just ask myself, you know, I give myself permission to ask myself now after that experiment, you know, do I want to? You know, because I don't believe in people making love when they're not ready. And so one of my key signatures that I always tell my couples to do, and I share with my husband, honey's like, hey, honey, you ready? I'm like, I don't know, not yet, but I'm getting ready for you, you know, and it's just kind of like an easy way to kind of let your partner off the hook. And my husband loves it. He thinks it's hilarious. And he's like, okay, cool. I'll try it again in 5 hours, you know. But, you know, we have this open communication with each other where he can be his fully expressed sexual self and I can be mine. And we can both allow each other permissions into our bodies when we're feeling ready.
I love that. I think the whole anxiety thing as well, I think that it just carries over into everything, doesn't it? It's just when you're trying to control situations or XYZ, how it goes, you're actually not in control. If that makes sense. It just adds to things and you can't fully be in it, so to speak.
Right. You're either living in flow or you're not. I don't really think there's an in-between. This weekend was like a perfect moment in time where I went back into that masculine energy this weekend because I'm pushing to get ready for a launch. And I was like, no, I can't do that anymore, Eva.
Do you think with this, and this is something I see, because we used to do a hell of a lot of work within the corporate world, and I always used to love speaking to like really high-powered, influential business women. And I always noticed a lot of them really had a hard time. Like when I actually got them to open up and I was speaking to them either about the business or whatnot, and it always used to come back to the love life and how they were just, that was the one area that just never really went anywhere. Click. Or they were just constantly, click, perfect word. We just kept crumbling. Do you see that quite a lot? Is that something where that pops up? Absolutely. How would you help those people?
Oh, yeah. I would probably take a look at trauma, traumas. I would probably take a look at where she felt unsupported, where she felt unsafe being vulnerable, where she felt unsafe being in surrender. Women that are in that space, especially if they're like having a hard time with their love life, it's usually from a place of I'm not safe here. And also they haven't quite learned how to hold space for themselves yet. And so it's super difficult to hold space for the masculine because the masculine, they don't like to be criticized. Nobody likes to be, but definitely, they don't like to be criticized. They don't like to be attacked. They don't like these expectations, like you must blah, blah, blah. It's like momming them, you know? And so there's ways like compassionate communication and things like that that these women can learn. So I'd probably take a look at what happened with them internally, and then I would skill set them up with how to communicate, how to get their needs, wants, and desires met without attacking or blaming or projecting. And same stuff I do with couples, honestly. One person and two people, there's no difference between the two.
I was going to say, it all sounds like it kind of leads back to the same things. And it's more just a case of you've got to go to the root of it. What's actually caused this? Why is it affecting everything else? And then that kind of ripples out and allows everything to flourish, so to speak.
Yeah. And there's usually a paternal wound, for those ladies. It's not usually a mom wound. It's usually some kind of paternal situation or an ex-boyfriend that, they were severely traumatized in or something. Like I said, every behavior makes sense within its context if you dig deep enough. And then it's just about kind of, again, it's not about like, oh, poor babying them. It's just like, okay, what happened? Okay, I get it. Let's figure out how we can, use this as a mindset Jedi trick. I talk about that all the time to kind of figure out like, okay, how can we be aware of this? And then how can we make a different choice? It's actually 5 major quadrants, right, that I work in. It's trauma awareness, personal growth, accountability, communication mastery, emotional intimacy maintenance, and sacred sexuality. Those are the 5 quadrants that I work with all the time. And they're all connected to everything.
I personally feel that the biggest one that I see lapse is the communication thing. I personally see not just in love and relationships, within businesses that we help, brands, XYZ, throughout the board.
Oh yeah.
The art of true connection has been really lost, both from listening, people just hearing what they want to hear, and from the art of actually getting a clear message across to where people actually understand it. And I feel like with this conversation, what we're going into here is a lot of these pillars really do rely on communication and being vulnerable in that communication as well.
Yeah, like there's lots of ways to hedge communication. I specialize in communication mastery. I mean, if there's one thing that I'm super specialized at, that would be it. And that's probably because couples come in with 3 problems: sex and intimacy. I don't feel connected. Communication, we're just getting triggered and our fights are escalating. And my partner, they usually go like this, doesn't take accountability. Those are the 3 things. So for me, I have to intervene on all levels when that happens, right? And kind of get a really landscape of it. But after I get a landscape of it, then we just kind of go right in and we just start with the solutions. And the communication has to be the first thing that we do. First it's trauma awareness, then it's communication, then emotional intimacy, then sacred sexuality can happen. Because without that communication piece, you're not going to be able to dial in those other things as well. You're just not going to be able to do it.
So I love this. Is there a hierarchical, is that a word? Hierarchical pyramid or something like that, where it's like, yeah, like that's exactly the one I wanted. Yeah, but for this, is there, you've got to get this pillar. So what's that? These are the foundational bases, and then you can start to build up the skyscraper.
Well, sacred sexuality is at the top.
Yep.
For sure, right? So first, and it can go either one. It can go
that's
trauma
what everyone's
awareness.
aiming for, correct?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, everyone wants that. It's just what's the map to get there, But anyway, first it'd be trauma awareness. Getting a landscape of your family system and your partner's family system immediately. And I don't mean who does what, whose role, who has more money, all that stuff. Although money is actually a very important conversation. I did my research on money. We could talk about this some other time. And then trauma awareness needs to be that piece. I call it family system awareness, but it's really trauma awareness. Really what I'm looking for is trauma. I mean, that's the truth. Do I normally call it that when I'm with my clients? Sometimes they do. Sometimes people hear that word and they're like, no, I'm closing down, So I just listen for it, The next thing is personal growth accountability. And you really can't get personal growth accountability without looking at your family of origin. You just really can't. because then you have blind spots, you know what I mean? You're suppressing, you're dissociating, you know what I mean? You can't really get to that personal part without understanding where you came from and where you're going. It's just like history. You know, the reason why we're fucking repeating history over and over again is because we're not paying attention. This is total soapbox moment. We're not paying attention to the things we've already done to each other. We've already bombed cities and people and killed people, yet we're pretending like that stuff didn't happen, and we're just continuing the path. That's the equivalent of not looking at your family of origin and not paying attention and dissociating and so forth, and then and just burying that and being like, oh, I haven't thought about that in so long, you know. Oh, that's perfect, let's talk about it, you know, because unawareness is what kills people. That's what traps people forever. And there's no way around it. I have tried. Trust me, I have tried. So it'd be personal growth awareness, accountability, then communication mastery. And once you have the communication mastery, then it's emotional maintenance, right? And then sacred sexuality. Then you've got the whole thing, babe.
And then it's on fire. I love that. That actually, I can just see that how it works its way up so perfectly. It's so simple as well. Perfect. Absolutely perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. How did you what would you say the biggest thing that people come to you is? Like, so obviously you're a very popular lady, and you're obviously very good at what you do. What would you see the biggest, is there like one biggest complaint or one key thing which you really see couples or singletons like myself coming to you and they're like, look, this is it. And if there was kind of like one thing you could do to help those people, what would that be?
To go inward. You know, I know it sounds pretty lame, but go inward, create a meditation practice as quickly as possible. Create, you know, make sure that you do at least 2 personal growth retreats or events or something like that per year, where you really take a deep inquiry into yourself. You know, I mean, that's just like a question that I'm answering. If I was working with a client, I would probably go at it in the same way that I would work with my couples. I do have a lot of individuals that I work with. I would say 40% of my practice is individual client work. But, and I love, like, it's so refreshing to just, you know, like tomorrow, for example, I have 10 couples lined up for tomorrow at my office. Wednesday, I have 10 couples lined up. But when I have that one individual that comes in, I'm like, oh, cool, let's play, you know, like, let's do some sound healing, you know, and like, we'll get hippie with it sometimes, you know, because I love doing that stuff too. I'm such a shaman, like inside my soul for sure. And, you know, I love that, you know, where I could just talk one-on-one and I don't have to manage, you know, 2 realities. But go inward, you know, like, take a look at what's going on with yourself personally, figure out where your wounds are so you don't repeat them, and learn how to build communication skills. You know, learn how to build communication skills now, so that way you can build intimacy and sacred sexuality right away. You know, because I find that if people can really build their communication skills from a place of compassion, and I don't mean just like we're talking right now, I mean real, true, vulnerable, compassionate communication, conscious communication. When people can learn how to do that, I find that they can mirror that in a relationship really well. You know, it's like, it's actually what I did with my relationship. I learned how to do it. I came back to my partner and he's like, oh, I like that so much better. Let's do that. You know, and then you go from there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, total sense. Total sense. So flipping it back again to the singletons who will be listening to the show, and I know if I'm going to put that message out, there's a lot. So when it comes down to single people, for example, finding a partner, would you say that given where we've gone with this conversation, that to attract, they must first become? So when a lot of people are like, I'm just trying to find the right person, how would you navigate this course of action when it is a single person who's coming to you kind of like, look, I really kind of want this in my life, but I'm getting nowhere with it. Where do we go with this?
I would okay, like, I'm working with a client right now who's a soul client. She's like a soul sister. And you know, there's lots of approval addiction going on, you know. And approval addiction and the experience of sex and relating in that space is so much different than knowing where you came from, feeling solid and grounded in who you are, and communicating from that place. Because that place, you have a higher deserve level. From that place, you're treating yourself like a king or a queen, like you deserve to be treated, and you're giving yourself that self-love. And then you're going to attract that. But there's a very fine line, and I say this with the most detailed, careful response, honestly. Because if there is something lurking in this person's background as a reason for why they can't show up, because I will tell you for sure right now, Simon, that it's there. I just need to find it, and we just need to uncover it. It's almost like I'm an archaeologist, like emotional archaeologist. We're just going burying, we're digging for these things,
chipping away.
Like, oh, eureka, got it. Okay, and then we kind of flip it on its head, right? And a lot of people in the spiritual community are completely spiritually bypassed, Simon. Like, they're not really fully embodied, you know what I mean? They're like, oh, I healed my shit, everything's gone. And then they get into a relationship and boom, it's like fireworks go off, or some kind of personality situations happening.
Yeah.
And that's why people are finding themselves in these relationships, but there's something that's not clicking, And a lot of times, for example, I'll give you a quickie here, because this is more advanced. All right. When just, I'm going to make it super simple though. Okay. So like, let's say you have like an alcoholic father, right? Or an alcoholic mom. And, you never really got that connection. Okay. Because our first connection in the world, whether you want to dissociate from your parents or not, are the first connection you've had. So deal with it. Okay. And we really need to pay attention to that. It's the first connection that you've ever had in this planet, in this world. And that is an energetic alignment that you had to associate with to survive as a human being, right? So you take, let's say a son, right? Or actually, let's take, let's do a son. And he didn't really have contact with his father, but he hated when he drank. Simon. He knew that I'm never going to grow up. I'm never going to drink like that, right? All of a sudden, he finds himself at a bar, 21. And this is super subconscious, right? He finds himself at a bar taking his first drink, right? And all of a sudden, his dad is now attached to this drink, dear. His dad is attached to this drink because the drink carries the memory of his father. So now son becomes alcoholic. It's not the drink that people are addicted to. It's the emotional attachment that they're lacking, that they lost. Does that make sense?
Oh, 100%, yeah.
So if you're single and you're finding yourself over and over again, like hitting your head against the wall, like my client who we just uncovered this like super deep, like subconscious wound, not even a wound, but like this wanting deeply to connect with her family. And she knows that her mother and her, they're actually like completely emotionally aligned, and she hates it. Like her mother has this approval thing and she has this approval thing. And, her mother's got this going on and she's got like, we're just seeing all the patterns, And she's like, and we did this in one session, and she's like, oh, they're all there, Eva, they're all there. And I'm like, okay, cool. So now that we know they're there, what can we do to make the choice to shift them? And that weekend, she met someone. And like, it was very interesting that she attracted someone totally different than she normally would attract. And she's still kind of integrating all these different thoughts and these patterns. But really at the core of it was, she was really missing her attachment with her mom. Like the same patterns that her mom was embedded with subconsciously or projected on are the same patterns that now she has going and looming around. And if she grows out of them, guess what? It's just like when somebody becomes super wealthy and they have a poor family. It's like there's money guilt and all this other stuff that comes up for them, right? This is her becoming her own self, no longer attached to mom identity. And this happens for 30, 40, 50-year-old people. You know what I mean? You don't have to be in your 20s to be having these little subconscious layers, you know what I mean, that kind of keep us stuck if we don't know how to uncover them and then move through them consciously and deliberately.
It's quite amazing to hear this. I think we've been doing this show now a year, and I think one of the biggest things that comes up with the majority of like coaches, experts, people who are in the field doing lines of service for others, it always does come down to identity. That's the biggest. A lot of people just have that hard time letting go and trying to rebuild or refine this next part. Yeah, it just sounds like the same thing again with you there. And in this realm,
yes, it's the evolution. 100%. We're constantly evolving from what we came from. Period. It doesn't matter if you came in on the plane, in this earthly plane, with abusive parents, with parents that were just a little bit healthier, or you know what I mean. And then of course, then you have society, right? Then you have culture. Then you have religion that informs people. I mean, there's so many aspects of stuff that inform people. I just like to play in the family realm most of the time. But it's not that I don't consider other aspects of culture, society, and what happened to you when you were a teenager, or what happened in your 20s or your 30s. All of those things, all of our experiences matter. But our personalities, the truth is, our personalities are developed between the ages of 1 and 7 years old, Simon. That's it. So if we can kind of really pay attention to those core issues, all the other ones fall away.
Yeah. So it really is a case of that's where it all lies, isn't it? Go in, work it out, rip out the weeds, the roots, so to speak, rebuild up. Incredible.
Yeah.
So I'd love to go into, we've got quite a few little things that I want to go into. I want to be completely respectful of your time because I know what time it is over with you. But another one of the core questions which we got through, and I really didn't expect this one to come through, but I'm really glad it did, was the keys to both sex and relationships after lust.
Oh, well, if you don't have any emotional intimacy, then you're not going to move on. You're not going to grow. I mean, I can tell you for sure that the sex I'm having now is 10 times better than the sex I was having when I met my husband. That's for sure. And I was making love to him. I was making love to that version of him back then, and vice versa. And now we've evolved into a whole nother space and time where like, I literally don't even realize time is going by in those moments, So like, you're just completely immersed. So what I'm saying is that lust stage is actually just the baby phase. What it really takes is to do the work as a couple. What it really takes is to do the work individually. And then you get the benefits of sacred sexuality. Then you get the benefits of understanding, who this person is that you're making love to, and how are they holding gentle, loving, guiding space and communicating with you and holding space. I mean, my husband, the most valuable thing that I offer to my husband, besides me being me, which is what he tells me, is that I was the only person that did not judge him and put him down or make him feel inadequate or project that he was inadequate. Let's put it that way, because we both take accountability for our own feelings, right? But I was the only person that was really able to hold space, and he was able to like flourish in that space, and obviously my aggressive personality didn't help. Now I have a much softer, I mean, I wear scarves every day now, Simon. I mean, I never used to wear dresses. Let's put it that way. It was like a whole different Eva, but now it's like this. And so I guess the answer to that question is you have to go deeper with that person and allow for that emotional vulnerability through conscious communication to get past that lust phase. Otherwise, it doesn't go anywhere. Otherwise, what happens? I'll tell you what happens actually. And this is not coming from anywhere else but the thousands of couples I have, probably close to, I was just thinking, I used to say 10,000 hours, but it's close to 15,000 hours of working one-on-one with couples, like in their face, in my face. And I have found that every single person, when they get out of that lust phase, you either go into war with each other and your traumas just war each other to the point of no return, or and they break up because the contempt gets too high, or they figure out a way to get around it, or they come in and work with someone like myself or someone else out there that's just really knows how to help hold space for couples. And they figure it out. And by the way, like, it took me 10 years to figure it out with my husband. Don't do that to yourselves. Like, I have a 90-day program that teaches couples how to do this in 90 days. And then they practice it. It doesn't stop after 90 days. Then they practice it. Then they take everything that they've learned and they're like, oh, let me apply it, And I'm actually taking my private practice business now online. Like, this is the year where I'm taking it online, Simon. And I can't wait. Like, I'm so excited because I can't see as many couples that come in my office. Like, I have to say, I can't see you. Like, I have to refer people out. But how cool is it that I can bring people on a platform and I can teach the same things and do deep work with them and they still get the same results, It's like super cool.
Yeah, it's massive. Help more people as well. That's a big thing. You can serve the world instead of the locals. Going back to that question, if we just skip back a little bit. Do you know, we kind of like live in this world of perfection, and now everything's like, if it's not correct or if it's not figured out or if it's not good, it has to stop, and if it has to end.
Yeah.
Do you see that this is a big thing? Is we're expecting, or within relationships or new people entering relationships, if something's not right, they just give up. They'll hit the first hurdle and they'll just turn their back and say, no, it's not the right thing for me. Instead of actually doing great things, take work, anything in life. Yeah. And do you think we're just getting lazy and just not doing the fucking work?
I love that question. I mean, that question, out of all the questions, that question lights me up so much because when couples come in to see me, if they're not fighting, it's a problem because then they've gotten too far, right? Like, I like it when couples come in and they're fighting and they have passion and, trust me, I've had some yelling matches in my office and slamming doors at my office before, for sure. It can get pretty heated, but the answer to that question is, if you're fighting, it's because you've hit a place where you need growth in yourself and your relationship. It's both. And I've lived through it personally. Like, I've not just seen it in my relationships with the couples, and my couples love hearing that, by the way. They're like, oh, okay, this is a good thing.
It's
and of course
it
doesn't feel like a good thing, But think about it. Like, if you're single, sometimes we abuse ourselves. Let's talk about that for a second. Sometimes we have this internal garbage that we spew ourselves, or sometimes we're beating up ourselves, or we're hard on ourselves, or we're judging ourselves, or criticizing ourselves. I mean, we do it with ourselves, so of course we're going to do it with a partner. I mean, it's like, duh, hello, of course we're going to do it. But how are we going to stop doing that with ourselves and stop doing it with our partner? I mean, it's really that simple.
It's so much more amplified as well when it's with a partner, because when it's yourself, you can control it. Or you can suppress it. Yes. But when it's a partner, nope, it's a stick of dynamite.
Yes, it's true. Yeah, and if it feels like a stick of dynamite, that just means that you've hit, like, I talk about traumas like a trigger minefield. They're basically walking around like this, Simon. Like, they don't understand where the traumas are. It's like literally going to war, and you're about to walk into a minefield, and you're like, oh shit, I don't know where the landmines are, and I'm probably going to get my head blown off. That's the equivalent of what happens with my couples. I'm serious. They come in and they literally want to tear at each other's throats sometimes. And, you know, it's like, okay, guys, what's really happening is we're hitting some major triggers. Let's have a conversation about it. Let's stop the arguments just for 1 second, because my couples like to come in all the time and talk about the argument they had. I'm like, guys, we're not going to do that today. Okay. We're going to get into some work and we're going to do some work and that's the difference between like someone that's really seasoned with couples and someone that's not. If you go to a couples therapist or a coach or whatever, and they just talk about, oh, what kind of argument you had yesterday, that's not the work, guys. That's not the work. That's just literally wasting your time and your money, actually. The only time that I hear about an argument, I do it one time in one session, and that's it. After we do all the growth work and everything else, and they have an argument that they have, then I come in, I'm like, okay, let's practice. Let's practice the communication. Let's practice. Let's figure out what's going on within. And then, the coaching starts from there. A lot of it is just teaching it first, and exploring. And then you kind of go into the coach. So it goes teaching. First it goes exploring, then teaching, and then coaching. That's kind of like how it happens.
That's insane. I love hearing that. I've just got visions in my head as well of like just shit being thrown through the office. Do you know what I mean? Like, yeah. I can only imagine. I'd love to be a fly on the wall.
So would a lot of people.
Another one that we got through.
I think in my office, like a box. What's that?
Yeah. I was going to say another one that we got from one of our listeners was about actually someone who's in a relationship. So they've been in a relationship for a long time and they want to spice things up. How are they best going to do it? So this is clearly directed towards the bedroom. They've been in a long-term relationship and they're looking to spice things up in the bedroom. What's the best way to go around this without scaring the partner off?
It depends on what stage they're at. I would want to ask, like, what have they explored already? At what level of surrender? How much polarity is in the relationship? I would ask lots and lots of questions before I answered that. The first step, I think, is kind of doing what I mentioned earlier, like have fun doing that. I mean, that takes years to kind of hone and practice and develop, but if you're looking for the newest toy or something like that, that's different. You can just go to Hustler and you can get a toy and you can have some fun. If you're looking for intimacy tools, though, I mean, I teach a lot of sacred sexuality rituals. I teach hypnosis rituals. I teach tantric meditation for couples too. There's also really cool books that you can get. Actually, I'm reading one right now. I will send you a picture of it, but
amazing.
It's Sacred Intimacy Toolbox or something like that. And I'm reading it. My husband and I have this practice where I think most couples don't need so much help like with the sex part. They need help with the intimacy part a lot of the time. So my husband and I, we like to read to each other, and we read like relationship books, but fun ones to each other. Like you can even get like the Vampire series by Anne Rice, and you can do some erotica books, and you guys can read a couple pages to each other before you have sex. I mean, I have ideas beyond days, guys, honestly, but it's just really what is it that makes you excited? And then we can kind of go from there, And also, what are you looking for too? If it's just that the two of you guys are just laying there and there's not any passion type thing, then that has a lot to do with suppression. Like if your partner is suppressing themselves emotionally, they're going to suppress themselves sexually. So I'd probably look into that too, Simon.
Awesome. And last little one that we'll do on this segment was someone asked, how do I know if the person is the right person for me? And is there such a thing as a right person? I'd like to add to that, there's definitely such a thing as a wrong person.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It just depends on the growth of the person. Personally, I would answer that question like this. Only because it was my experience, so it's probably super biased. Okay. Most likely. I would say that if you love the way that person loves you, then they're probably someone that you should invest some time and growth work in.
That's such a cool answer. I love that. Absolutely love that. I
Yeah.
Have you ever seen the Simon Sinek snippet on Tom Bilyeu's show?
I think I have, and I like Simon Sinek, and I can't remember exactly what the name of the conversation, the concept was, though. If you remind me.
Yeah, so basically, it was on Tom Bilyeu's show, and someone asked. Actually, no one asked. It was they were on about business, and it was on about how sometimes you just have to trust in yourself that you already know the answer. And he was like,
Yeah.
give me one measurable fact which tells me that you love your partner." And Tom's just sat there like, "I can't literally give anything." He's like, I can't. And he's like, "But you love her, right?" And he's like, "Yeah, well, show me." And he's like, "This is the thing, is like, there is nothing to kind of give you the correct answer, but you just already know it's that thing, or you just trust in your intuition that that's the right thing for you to follow. And you just know."
I think it could be both and. I think intuition can be tricky sometimes because intuition is guided by the amount of experiences that we've had with listening to our intuition. Some people are really young in listening to their intuition, and some people are really old and seasoned in listening to that intuition, so they know themselves well. Especially when you're talking about love and dopamine and serotonin and sex hormones and oxytocin, all those types of things can be very blinding when you're in a newly sexually charged relationship that you know that you like this person, but you're not sure if they're for you. One really good measure, well, there's a couple. First one is if you really want no shit at all, like you really want the least amount of shit you possibly can, make sure that your partner, the person that you're with, has a secure attachment with their parents. And if they don't, you're probably going to have a little bit more work to do. Like Paul and I both have pretty secure attachments with our parents, a little bit of anxiousness in there, but then you get into attachment style, avoidant attachment, anxious attachment, all that stuff, right? If you don't know what that is, you can look it up. Sue Johnson was the founder of the theory or whatever. I'm sure you've heard of it, but whoever's listening. So when you're looking at that, you want to really pay attention to their attachment. And it doesn't mean like, you know, like that they have to be, chummy, because sometimes too chummy is not good either, where they maintain a certain amount of emotional distance. They don't talk about everything, but they share some things. There's some intimacy that's happening. Now, with that being said, I haven't really found not one couple, even with healthy parents, even with healthy environment, that needed to do some type of work in that regard, because as a person, as a human, we're here to protect ourselves and survive. Like innately, that reptilian brain is fully charged at all times, and our cerebral cortex, we're only 3 to 5%. We're only using it very, very little according to the evolutionary process. So then you're getting into science and stuff like that. But that would probably be at least the first, like, hey, how's your relationship with your family? If there's a lot of emotional cutoffs, right? Like complete emotional cutoffs, there's lots of trauma there, and you have to make a decision. Do I want to get through this together with this person or not? Right. And some people don't realize that there's trauma there because they never asked that damn question. And the first couple of times that they're dating, their first couple of months, those questions never come up. But if you're smart, you'll ask those questions. Right. And then if you're like, okay, this person's great, there is some stuff going on there, there's some red flags, but you know what? They've been doing a lot of personal growth work, because I believe people change and they evolve all the time. I do not think people never stay the same. They either get worse or they get better, right? So with that being said, like if you make the educated decision, like, okay, this person is trying, they're aware, they're cool with being accountable, they're okay with coming to the table and be like, hey, you know what, that was probably my bad, or I did project on you a little bit, and let me tell you why, blah blah blah. Like if you can have conscious communication on that level, then great. If not, take my program or take someone else's program and figure out if you guys can get through it, and then maybe everything will be fine. It's just, and then there's the intuition.
You've got such an amazing way of taking these they're just common, complex questions, aren't they? Which I'd say so many people are struggling
Yeah.
with and just breaking them. No, look, these are the four pillars, four, five pillars. Do this,
Yeah.
that will move you up the level.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I absolutely love that's how you like articulate this subject. I think it's brilliant.
That's so cool. Thank you very much. I'm a projector by nature. You know, my human, are you into human design at all?
Yes, completely.
Okay, I'm a projector, like through and through, you know, and I only think that's the reason why I can like go into things and then be like, oh, okay, cool. Let's say it this way. And I think that's just, I don't know, a gift that I was given. And,
It's amazing.
thankfully, you know, yeah.
I'm gonna go
But
rogue with
thank you.
this
Thank
because
you.
I'm gonna go rogue with this because I've just had a question that's popped up in my
Okay.
head.
Okay.
Again, over dinner, and from my own personal experiences, full transparency, I've had a little play. I've been on these such of things, such as like your electronic dating, like speed dating, swipe dating, whatever you want to call it, all that sort of stuff. Totally not for me. However, what I'd love to know is from your experiences, yes, they are helping people meet more people at a much quicker rate. But do you feel like these platforms are actually being of service or creating more detriment within this world of relationships, love, vulnerability?
I'd love to create my own dating site if that answers your question. I would love to create my own dating site. Like if somebody said, "Hey Eva, come over here and be the mind for this dating site," and then they had the capital and they just had built all the systems and did everything, like I would totally consult on something like that. Because I think that the
We
way
should
that
have a
they,
chat after this.
yeah, I'm down. Let's do it. Um, I I think that the way that people are building these sites are very immediate gratification, physical looks only, very very little. I mean, I remember when MySpace was around, like at least there was some, okay, who is this person, you know? I mean, I met Paul online. I mean, I never thought I would have met my husband online. Okay, I'm definitely one of those statistics, but it was so hard for me to make that profile site. Like I remember like swallowing my pride. I had so much pride back then. I'm like, am I really? Because I mean, that was 11 years ago, 12 years ago. Am I really making an online dating site? But my girlfriend just met her husband online. I'm like, maybe I will. And I wasn't one of the people that wanted to have kids. I didn't want to get married even because none of the people that I dated, I wanted to live with forever. You know, like I never saw myself with anyone. And it's so funny because my husband and I waited like a month and a half to kiss each other. Like we were talking on the phone for 3 months,
That's like a
and I was like, "Is this
lifetime
guy?"
in today's world.
I know, dude. Trust me, I know. It was very weird. Like I'm one of those like chivalrous kind of like old school chicks, you know. So if you don't ask me, I'm not going, you know. So we talked on the phone for 3 months. We were friends. Like we were friends. And I was like really being friendly with him, and I was dating other guys at the time that were asking me on a date. And Paul would always be like, "Hey, like whenever you're free, let me know, you know." And I'm like, "Okay, cool." And then I just couldn't bring myself to be like, "I'm free now," you know, like it just felt like an act of desperation at that time. But but anyway, long story short, we finally went on a date. And after all of that, like after all of those like 3 months of courting each other, we then waited like a month and a half to kiss, like because he was my husband was he's not very schooled in the sexual arena. Like he didn't have a lot of girlfriends or anything like that, you know. He was almost very protected, right?
Was there plenty of those? I have to ask this.
Go
Was there
ahead.
plenty of those moments where it's like at the end of a date and it's just that like so I'm gonna go now and you kind of like both waiting for it and no one
I
moves.
don't remember if we did. I can't remember, Simon. Like I don't know, it just felt like there was such a flow that neither of us really, I didn't like, I'm not one of the, like, that's where my feminine really comes in. Like, I'm not one to rush things, you know, where I'm like, let me take off your clothes and get on the bed, you know, like, it's not my thing, you know, unless I'm in love with you and like, unless I'm your partner, you know,
Yeah.
but, but there was a specific moment in time that I never thought I would ever have experienced in my life because my mom and dad got married in 6 months. Okay. And I always thought that was crazy. Like I was like, really? 6 months? You're totally crazy, you know? Um, but they always told me these stories, like when you know, you know, all the older people, when you know, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, my we were out on the balcony. I remember it like yesterday. We were out on the balcony. We finally kissed. The magic, the fireworks went off. The ocean was in the background. I was like, oh, this is my husband. It was so familiar to me. Like complete drop in where a person that would never thought about marriage, I don't want kids, I'm not having kids, and like had no path at that moment, I knew that he was going to be with me forever. And I think now I've had lots of soul tie connections in my life, but there have been specific moments where I'm like, oh, that's familiar. Oh, that's familiar. Oh, that's familiar. Like we've known each other in another plane, another lifetime, or something like that, probably 100 times over. And now we're so dang romantic, Simon. Like it's almost like, I mean, probably would sicken people, I'm sure, but we're so romantic. We're just like so attuned with each other now that we're like, we want to be together for more lifetimes than this lifetime. Like at the rate that we're growing and evolving, like we're like, oh, I'm going to see you in the next lifetime when my soul, incarnates, if you believe in that, right? And it's just, you just know when you know sometimes. So it's when you know, and then also, how do they love you? Do you love the way they love you?
Yep. What I'm loving about this conversation is how you've merged this entire story and every question into its awareness of self, growth, how you get into these, and both parties need to be aware to grow together. Does that make sense? To evolve together, to kind of like find their own paths and come together with a mutual goal and intention. And it's amazing to hear how like it really just kind of in such a over complex conversation arena, how if we can strip it back down to its simplistics and its basics, like those really are the things that can slingshot love, relationships, and intimacy forwards. Yeah. But they do take work, and the work is the fucking hard part. Again.
Yeah. Well, it can be fun. It can actually be fun. Mastery is simplicity. The reason why this conversation is coming together so well is because it's years and years and years and years of sitting in front of couples, you know what I mean? And really taking a good look, because I have to have integrity with my work. I can't have a shit relationship and then help couples with their relationships. It's just not happening. Matter of fact, it's almost impossible to do. I always thought to myself, like, what if I had a bad relationship? How would I be able to hold space? The answer to that question is absolutely not. Also, at the beginning of my practice, I never, people always ask me, do you have to be married, or do you need to be in at least a conscious relationship in order to serve other married couples? And now that I've done it, even if we decided to divorce or break up or something like that, the experience of it helped me embody it in a level in myself in a way that I can hold more space, if that makes sense. Just kind of thinking about it from that perspective. But simplicity is mastery. If you can really get into that simple dynamics, boom, it clicks. I mean, that's the whole point. And the other question was, what now? I lost it. You talked about mastery and simplicity, or I started talking about that.
There was no question. It was just simply just saying, like, in a world where it's become so over complex, how when we just literally bring it down to its simple binding factors, both of self and as the mutual cause, then that's the thing that slingshots it forwards. I was just saying how the work can be the hardest part as well.
Oh yeah, the work can be the hardest part. It doesn't have to be. Like, it's the hardest part if you don't have someone like holding the container. And I would say that was the hardest part for my husband and I. We didn't have someone like holding the container while we were going through the shit.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. And it's just like with coaching, business, anything, if you can hold the container, I mean, I think that's what people that are in the coaching, leadership, business really do. You're really holding the container for that couple to get through all the hard stuff. And I can't tell you, Simon, how many times I laugh in my office with my clients, like, there's bellowing laughs coming from my office even when we're talking about the hardest shit. Like people are laughing, they're having fun, like, yeah, there are moments where there's yelling or there's triggers or something like that. But once we get past that stuff, they're like, oh, like it doesn't have to be that hard. And then they start to surrender, the trust, and they start to really get into it because they're already held, if that makes sense.
Yep. Complete sense.
I mean, I think it doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't. It is hard though if you're tripping over yourself constantly and you don't have anyone to really give you guidance on what's really happening.
Yeah, straight up. Now, with it being Valentine's Day in I think 10 days,
yeah.
I'd love to get from you, is there something like an exercise or kind of something you could say to couples or individuals that they could maybe take forth and carry into Valentine's Day to try?
Yeah.
Oh, I love this. That was so quick.
I do. It's one of my favorite ones. I do it with my husband, and we do it once a week. So what I'd recommend is not to do this. This is an intimacy exercise. It's not a sexual exercise, but it leads to sex sometimes. And it can be very, very productive. So, this is especially so for couples that have like really busy lives. And lots of businesses and stuff like that. Like between my husband and I think we have like 5 different businesses and, like so much stuff going on, that we're either taking care of ourselves personally, we're hanging out, or we're working. So we really have to carve out like that intentional space to have those intimacy conversations. So once a week, we sit down with each other. We usually go to the beach and we play chess. Together. We like to play chess a lot. I absolutely am terrible. He's much better than I am, and he beats me all the time, but we still play it. And we ask each other these 3 questions. What are you celebrating this week? And then I go first, and then he goes first, then he goes, or we'll just literally just kind of hold space and listen and ask all 3 of these questions in linear fashion, right? And sometimes these conversations with my husband, they last 10 minutes, and sometimes they last hours. Like if we're at the beach and we're really kind of just riffing off of it, we're like, oh yeah, this is fun. So the question is, what are you celebrating this week? And this this taps you into, what are you grateful for? What are you grateful for? And what are you celebrating as a couple? What are you guys celebrating as a person? What are you guys celebrating with your business? Like I'm talking about a full celebration moment, not just one thing you're celebrating. Like let it out, like allow yourself to be in that space. And your job as the listener is to listen, right? Don't give advice. Don't, offer some solution if there's a problem that they bring up or something. You're just listening like, oh yeah, that's so cool, or great job, honey. This is an opportunity for you to kind of praise your partner, give them some appreciation. Sometimes like a lot of the things that we'll do is we'll also talk about in our celebration conversation, like what do we appreciate about each other too for this week or this day. And actually, we do that every night. Like before we go to bed, we just naturally have that conversation, because happily married couples, by the way, are 5 times more positively acknowledging. Write that down. Happily married couples are 5 times more positively verbally acknowledging than unhappily married couples. And that's completely the truth, by the way. I mean, my practice backs that up. So having a gratitude practice, like before you go to bed, like just one thing that you really appreciate from your partner, that your partner made your day go a little bit better, a little bit easier, and say that to them. Don't just keep it in and just say, oh, I really appreciate that in your head. Say it. Create an appreciation culture, right? So the second question in this little intimacy exercise is, what are you struggling with, or what are you feeling challenged with this week, babe? Right? And so they kind of go through, hey, well, I had a little bit of insecurity here, or man, going and do this speaking conference was a little bit nerve-wracking for me, but make sure that you're going into like the emotions in that conversation, because that builds the vulnerability too. And it was just really tough for me. And then the response to that is, man, that sucks, but I know that you'll get through, or something kind of like empathetic or reassuring to your partner. A lot of times people don't know how to naturally have that conversation. So they literally need like like, what do I say in those moments? especially for my male clients, and a couple of my female clients where they'll just like, they're so solution oriented that they don't know how to hold space because they're not holding space for themselves. Again, going back to that mirror, right? And then the last question is, how can I support you next week? How can I support you? How can I make it better? And this is like the time where you want to say what you want. Like, oh, I need some more sexy time, or I need some more kisses, or I need some more hugs, or you know what? I really would love to get flowers. Like I would love to have, my husband buys me flowers every week. I never was into flowers, but every time he gets them, it's like so cute. He walks through the door and he's got his flowers. Like, baby, I got you flowers at Costco. And it doesn't have to be like, like a whole bouquet where you spend $50, $100, $10 bouquet or something like that. But you tell your partner what you want. Don't set your partner up for success. Okay. Tell them what you want. Tell them what you like in bed. Tell them what kind of relationship, what makes you happy, what turns you on, how many hugs you need a day, how many hugs, you know what I mean? Like, don't be afraid to do it. And just because you request that doesn't mean your partner has to be like, yes, I'll do that for you. You know what I mean? They can negotiate it. They can say, I could do 3 hugs, but how about let's do 2 and meet halfway? I don't know, like whatever the negotiation is, right? But that conversation, Simon, is a conversation that saves a lot of my clients, to be honest, because the average couple has 2 hours of quality time a week with children. 2 hours. Think about that. They're usually in the grind. They're in the work schedule. They don't have lives, where they're really tapped into their self-care, and they're only spending those 2 hours of time together. So this conversation is like the highlight of their week. This conversation is the highlight of their intimacy. It's the highlight of their connection, especially if you're talking about having a 6-month-old, year 2, 3-year-old kids in the house still running around. And let's face it, the reality of that is really hard for my couples. I can't imagine being a mother and running a business and running a marriage and managing my dog. Like, hell no. Like I have to give up something, because it's a sacrifice. So a lot of my couples really have a hard time managing that flow of their personal lives with their business and with their kids. And sometimes people just suppress their own relationship dynamics and just put all of their energy into kids, which is another way to disassociate what's really happening.
Yeah.
But I guess that would be the intimacy exercise that I would recommend doing at every date night, one date night a week. In your bedroom. And also a lot of times couples choose to do date nights that are like at restaurants with lots of, woohoo, we're all partying. And that's great when you're single and you're just getting to know each other, because you need a little bit of extra, because you're getting to know each other. But after that, it's like, go to the beach, take a walk, go hiking, go into nature, make love in nature, get outside of like the grid, so to speak, and have fun together.
Love it. Absolutely love it. So there's one for everyone to crack on with on the 14th of this month. I'd love to know if people have done that as well. So obviously if people do it, then definitely let us know. We'd love to know people's feedback on how it's improved things personally. But just to kind of like round up on these conversations, I'd love to know more from like yourself on this sort of stuff. Now, if we could give one message to the entire world, both to help themselves and the relationships, and everyone in the world could hear that one message from you, what would you give?
Simon, that's a hard one. To learn to love yourself and honor yourself, because when you do that, you'll honor your children, you'll honor your pets, you'll honor your partners.
I love it. Absolutely love it. And Eva, for yourself, where can people find you? Where can people find out more about what you do and the work that you're doing?
Yeah, I would love for people to interact with me. That'd be cool. It is www.relationshiprevolutionaries.com. So relationshiprevolutionaries.com is the website. And they can contact me there, or they can get me on my email. I don't know if you do show notes, but it's couples seeking solutions at yahoo.com. Yeah.
Brilliant. And your social channels, where do you hang around online?
Yeah, so I have a bigger presence on Facebook than I do Instagram. I just started doing Instagram stuff like, I don't know, probably actively based 6 months ago.
The commitment to Instagram. It's like, oh,
I know,
okay.
I know. People were like, Instagram's so much better, Eva. And I'm like, okay, you know. But I'm like, I have my own personal Facebook page, and then I have my business page as well, you know, that they can contact me at. But the most active place that they can find me is my groups. I have a Relationship Revolutionaries group. And we have, you know, couples in there that are actively like wanting to learn new things. And I jump on there. I do a live every once in a while. And, you know, I post all my videos and stuff in there. So if you're wanting to hang out and really get some good stuff, I'd probably would join the group.
Awesome. So Eva, I just
Yeah.
want to like acknowledge you. I love at the minute I can see you're at like this popping moment, and I can see you've kind of like narrowed in, and it's all starting to build and grow. And obviously, as you go online, that's usually when the pop tends to happen. So I'm excited to watch that. Have you got any
Thank you,
ideas?
Simon.
Yeah, is there any book? I just can imagine with your energy and wealth of knowledge and how you articulate it to its simplistic format. Is there any
Yeah.
books or anything we should be on the lookout from you in the future with?
Yeah, there's a book called Compassionate Communication. Awesome book. Highly recommend that if you're looking to do something like that. I'll send you the book cover for that. The other Sacred Intimacy book that I just picked up for my husband and I, totally love it. Very, very much dig that book. And they've given me some great ideas even for my own programs, which is super cool. But if you're looking to get into psychology, Zen Mind Beginner's Mind is a great one to read. Zen Mind Beginner's Mind for meditation. It's so trippy. Every time I read that book, I feel like I'm just in a meditative state when I read it, because the guy that writes it is literally writing as if he's in a meditation.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. It's not really consciously written, if that makes, you know, it's more
Yeah.
subconsciously written. Super cool. And then if you're really wanting to understand family systems dynamics, a clinical book that is like my Bible, and especially if you're like a coach, you're a spiritual teacher, you're anything in the self-help arena, like Bowen Family Systems, you 100% have to read the entire book. Bowen Family Systems, it's this thick. It literally will crush your hand, but it's amazing. And it has, and also Ecology of the Mind by Gregory Bateson. It'd be very theoretical, but awesome.
Amazing.
Those are my tops.
Brilliant. Eva, look, I just want to say thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming on the show. It's been amazing to chat with you. I know we zigzagged from topic to topic, but there's just so much depth in this topic that you can go into. It's remarkable. So no doubt this won't be the last time we have you on.
Yeah, I would love to come back on. Thank you so much, Simon. You're a blessing. I love what you're doing too. Your Instagram page is on fire. I always love seeing your quotes and stuff. It lights up my day. So, and obviously your smile is gorgeous. You have a real, you know, sweet demeanor to you. And it's been really a pleasure to hang out with you today too.
Hey, more of it. I appreciate that. Thank you.